Okay, good evening. This is a work session of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Sleepy Hollow. Let me first welcome back Trustee Levy. Nice to have you back. We've been assured that none of the fires were your fault. And I hope you didn't get pressed into service while you were out there.
Almost.
But it's nice to have you back. The first item on our agenda this evening is a presentation from the New York Power Authority. Just by way of introduction to the Board of Trustees, I met with Jeff yesterday. You guys have seen a copy of the agenda, and this was a project that was considered by the village more than a year ago, I think, looking at upgrading our streetlights throughout the entire village. And what Jeff's going to be able to do this evening is kind of walk us through the proposal or an updated version of it and explain it to us. And I think it's a pretty interesting opportunity for us. So welcome and take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and trustees. Appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about the New York Power Authority and the Smart Street Lighting New York program that we're implementing statewide. I met with the mayor and Anthony yesterday, and I've been kind of on the road and in training since yesterday, so I would usually...
I'm sorry, Jeff. I should have done this at the very beginning. I was looking over at Trustee Levy and Trustee Gebler's stickers saying I voted. For those of you who are at home right now, the polls are open for another little less than 2 hours. So if you haven't voted, get out there and do it now. You still got an opportunity. It's one of the most important things you can do as an American. So make your voice heard. Thank you.
So anyhow, I was brought in yesterday to talk about street lighting. So I apologize that I don't have more of a professional presentation because I just didn't have the time to get in front of my computer and print stuff out and whatnot. But anyhow, I'm a guy who's more interested in really like the nuts and bolts of it anyway, and just talking through how the program would operate. So just to give you a broad overview of the New York Power Authority, you guys are a power customer of NYPA. So you get your electricity, low-cost hydro power from the Power Authority, which is the primary business that NYPA is in, generating low-cost electricity for the government sector. So Westchester County and New York City are two of our main major customers, and all the agencies that fall under that, as well as the municipalities in Westchester. So NYPA, in addition to generating electricity, renewable electricity, also implements energy efficiency projects for the public sector through a statutory authority, public authority law. We're allowed to offer these services to you as a village, and a village in turn can take advantage of NYPA's energy efficiency programs, because NYPA will basically, if we haven't done procurement for selected services, we will do procurements on your behalf. So we manage projects on a turnkey basis from anything from beginning with an engineer of record design process through procurement of the specified materials, as well as the labor and any other incidentals that could occur during an implementation of a project. So we handle that on the behalf of a village, and that helps expedite things. It means you guys don't have to try to figure out putting out your own RFPs for engineers, installation labor, making sure you're selecting the right type of materials, et cetera. So NYPA has a pretty good transparent business model in place to deliver this project. We have over 200 municipalities in our pipeline in various stages of work completed, in design, or in construction. And we just recently finished the village of Pelham as one of the nearby communities we've done in Westchester. That project went fairly well. So anyhow, as I met somebody from the village, Mr. Gross, and is that, how you doing? We met about a year and a half ago, and I had presented a potential project cost and savings of what you would achieve in energy savings. I kind of refreshed that more recently with some updated numbers, but basically, you might be looking at a kind of a spreadsheet that I could talk through, but this is an indicative proposal. It's an educated guess, in essence, with a lot of contingencies and allowances built into the project. So essentially, as NYPA does a project, looking at these rows, we have construction costs settled on materials. We have a vendor, Phillips, who won an RFP. So we would procure all of our materials that the engineers selected in terms of wattages, et cetera, through that contract we have with Phillips. NYPA does not mark up any materials. So I estimated, based on your existing wattages, what would be an applicable replacement wattage, and slotted it in on the price from Phillips. For some instances, maybe I said, oh, 54 would make sense, and that fixture is $108. Or if it was something less, a 25 watt would make sense, it's $77. So all those are reflected in that material cost. And the labor, I basically just estimated at $135 per fixture installed. That's based on other bids we've done throughout this region, including Pelham, which I believe came in at $115 a fixture. We just bid a bunch of projects up a little bit more north, and they came in at $134 per fixture. So I think at $135 plus an allowance built in a little bit lower in the sheet, this is a very conservative estimate of potential labor costs.
Sorry, is this for just Beekman Avenue or
This
for
is
a larger
for
area?
this is for 600 streetlights. That was basically, I got that number from an inventory sheet that I guess was supplied to me from someone in your village. That's
It would be
basically
most, if not all, of the streetlights in the entire village.
Okay,
yeah. So we'd want to do a
Intended to
comprehensive
be
package.
all of the streetlights in the village.
okay.
Yeah, so what we're going to try to do with the design is create consistent lighting throughout, and do a design that's specific to your community, with main streets, side streets, perhaps needing a little bit less light, perhaps intersections that you know are very busy. We would make sure we're providing enough light. So part of the design will be to customize those areas of concern, do some what we call photometrics, which is analyzing the amount of lumens that are on the roadways to make sure we're providing adequate light. Not too much light for people to complain, but not too little where pedestrians are at risk if they cross the street and such.
What's your standard? What do you go by?
We typically go by something called RP8, which is a design standard.
Is that ADA compliant?
ADA, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, we'll have an engineer of record. So I did a rough estimate based on doing this forever with lighting projects.
Right.
But we'll actually have an engineer, you know, look at that and take into account all those things. And if it's an intersection where, you know, folks are disabled and lots of that would happen, we'll make sure there's adequate light, for sure.
I have a question. The lights that we just put on Beekman, is that,
They're LED.
they're already LEDs?
So-
So those all through Beekman down to the edge on Hudson, because that's covered under, to
We
Andrews
didn't go all
rather?
the way down.
To Andrews?
Hey, mics, everybody.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to
sorry,
understand,
please,
because we've already
mics,
started
everybody.
some work, so that's not included in here, right?
You know, this was a snapshot in
Sure.
time a year and a half ago.
Right.
But we'll end up with unit pricing. So if
Okay.
it turns out that we do 517 lights and the bid came in at $128, well, that's what you pay. So, you know, we're not going to, you know, replace an existing LED with a new LED fixture.
No,
unless
no,
it's
I
too
just-
bright or something and it's an eyesore.
Sure, well, I wanted to understand just that we were not duplicating efforts on things that we've done.
Right.
But also, when I see that you're going to get soon into the energy savings, so in order to really understand your true savings, you have to know what your costs are. So directionally,
Right, right. So,
wanted to
so
know.
the savings were generated based on the reduction of kilowatt hours from your new lighting, based
Sure.
on then a rate that you're paying, whatever that is, I don't know off the top of my head, but maybe you're paying, let's say, 10 cents a kilowatt hour, you're gonna save 100,000 kilowatt hours from burn time, so you're gonna save $10,000 a year. That's just in a rough example.
Sure.
You know.
Sure,
So that's sort of like the math. So that with the lighting project, the savings are very predictable.
Sure.
Because it's, in essence, you're going from 400 watts to 100 watts. You're saving 300 watts. What's your cost per watt?
and then we're under contract with what we pay per
Right.
wattage?
Yeah.
Well, if the cost of energy goes up, then your savings changes.
Right. But you'll be using less of that more expensive
I
fuel.
understand, but your delta it could shift depending on what you're paying.
Right. Well, in fact,
Or
the
does it
value of,
project?
the value of energy efficiency increases with escalating energy
Mm-hmm.
costs.
Okay,
If energy was free, who cares about saving
Sure.
it? But if energy costs $10 a gallon, that gallon is more valuable.
sure.
Yeah, so,
I get that.
When you're, sorry, just one more
No, go
question. When you're looking at an overall project like this for a village, do you have some type of threshold for like light pollution?
well, all of these fixtures are night sky compliant.
Okay, great,
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah. So the LEDs will basically mitigate night sky pollution. The fixture is very directional. The light will be shining down on the roadways. What you have now, these Cobra heads, that's sort of like the prism of the lamp kind of extends over the front. So some of the light escapes, which means you're wasting energy lighting the sky, and people like to look at stars. So yeah, this will help with that.
Okay,
Yeah,
great, thank
yeah.
you.
Can I just ask you to walk us back on the process from the beginning of how you do this mechanically? So our existing light post would stay in place with the Cobra head or whatever it is, the lamp, and you would go in and change the LED
We change the
inside.
entire fixture head,
You
not
change the entire
not the
fixture.
post or the arm, but the lamp, but the head.
That's how you get night sky compliance.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Now, let me ask you about color temperature. Is there an attempt to match what's there right now, or is there?
Well, what you have now, as I was driving around, you have, I guess, high pressure sodiums that have kind of on, looking kind of yellowy orangey.
People like that.
So these will be a little whiter. These will be more like moonlight. Okay, that's what we call the Kelvin.
Yeah.
The higher the Kelvin, the brighter white it is. So we would go most likely here 3,000
We
Kelvin.
don't know anything about this, right?
Yeah, we have a little history with
We talked
some
about
bollard lights. I'm sure you heard about it.
Yeah,
but,
some of them are like probably 4,000 or 5,000 Kelvin. They're so bright.
engineers recommended a certain amount of lights with a certain amount of coverage space for ADA compliance, and
Right.
it really turned out to be sort of a nightmare.
Right. No,
Not
no,
for
we-
people with
No, we would
disabilities.
never,
but-
this is, I'm not saying this is rural, but this is a nice, quiet suburban area that
Right.
would be ridiculous to do 4,000 Kelvin.
Right.
So we would do 3,000, or we could even go lower to 2,800 Kelvin. But the issue is that in order to get lumens, which is the light, if you drop your Kelvins, you need more watts.
Right.
So you'll save less energy. So there's sort of like that fine line, and the sweet spot seems to be three. It's all Greek, I know, I get it. It took me a while to. But
second?
but typically 3,000s are not too bright on your cornea and make the roadways safer for pedestrians, for sure, so. They're very
How have your
directional
past
too.
projects been received by the public? Have you had any issues with
No.
complaints about
No.
brightness and color
No.
temperature?
Well, there's going to be one in every bunch. I don't care where
Right.
we are. There's going to be one in
Right.
every group. But for this, no.
Right.
Very rare that we've had complaints.
So the LEDs require different fuses, right? Because it looks like you
Yes,
got
we put in new
fuses
fuses.
for
yeah.
each one that you have to do.
Each one would get a new fuse. Yeah, yeah. And part of what we do is we set up an allowance, and you get a photo cell too. That's the basically, dusk to dawn, making the light go on and off. We have a $15,000 allowance for wiring in case we have to do some rewiring. If we don't need it, we don't need it. I also built in it should really say labor allowance of another 10%, just in case, because we want to kind of set up a budget that's very conservative and, under-promise and over-deliver. So when we come in lower than this, everybody's happy. So there's a bit of a little bit of, fudge factor in this,
Right.
just as a buffer, you know?
And who do you deal with as the liaison with the village? Who would it be? The DPW?
Most
or-
likely the DPW.
Okay,
We'd also, when we do a design kickoff meeting, we like to bring in maybe the police chief to identify those corners, those areas of concern. That, hey, we know, we want to add a light because at that dead end, kids are hanging out down there. So let's throw a couple of lights up there. So we want to work with you on those details. And that's kind of what the contingencies of this thing is set up. There's a 10% contingency set too. We might not need a nickel of it, but we might want to add lights, or, some of the arms might be on their last legs. And we would work with the DPW guys or whomever you wanted to say, hey, this one looks like we should, while we're up there, we should put a new arm in there, So we have a little bit of an allowance built in. And again, if we don't need it, we don't need it, you don't pay for it. So
Jeff,
we-
I've got a quick question. What's your last name, by the way?
Lano.
Leno. Okay, so to John's point, I want to take a couple of steps back, really for myself as well as the public, to understand, this budget that you're talking to us about is something that we would basically pay for. The savings that we gain is based on your ability to leverage the vast opportunities that are in the state, right? So we get a better deal on the lighting and the cost and all of that.
Absolutely.
Right? And in terms of the management of this, you guys would basically soup to nuts, cover it.
Turnkey.
And basically what we do from the village standpoint is pay for it at the end of the day, right?
Basically.
Are there opportunities where the state is looking at, okay, first of all, it's a great deal that we get because you guys are doing a ton of the work, right?
We got 300,000 lights in the pipeline.
Yeah.
And we intend to do 500,000. That's the goal of the program. So that buying power for all those materials.
Right.
It's unmatchable. And,
Right.
you go to the store and try to buy one of these things, you're going to spend $200.
Right.
You come to us, you spend 86.
Yeah. And is there any other kind of matching funds from other state departments where they basically say, okay, NIPA was able to
Yes.
get this great deal. In addition, the state's going to award you X amount of dollars to help support.
Right. I mean, there are a couple of things, and I think you guys were pursuing becoming a climate smart community. And there's also another program that funds had been exhausted, but my understanding is that a new round of money is going to become available, and that's something called a Clean Energy Community Program, CEC program. And they're giving out grants, and I haven't seen it because it should be announced this week, I hope, where based on, they had 2 or 3 thresholds of community size, but grants of up to $100,000 were available. Now, you're smaller, maybe you're capped at $50,000, please don't quote me, but one of the action items, and that program says, there are 10 things a community can do in order to achieve this designation, and you have to do 4 of them. Well, street lighting is one of them. So you could basically, if you've done some other things like solar permitting, or put in an electric vehicle charging station, or did some other energy efficiency work, you get to 4, you could become a clean energy community. So, and I could connect you with that program, or you can go on NYSERDA, that's a NYSERDA program,
Right.
to figure out, how to enroll in that and begin a dialogue with one of the local coordinators who can then meet with you and say, yeah, oh, look, you've already done 2 things, you do this and one other, and, yeah, you can get a grant. Now, what NIPA is prepared to do is finance this project. So this project could cost the village nothing out of pocket. We carry all the expenses and then end up with a bottom line number. Like if by miracle this project turned out to be $356,873.27 by some magic, your simple payback with the amount we we figure is going to be saved on both electricity and and a few dollars saved on maintenance, because our fixtures do come with a 10-year warranty, so you should never have to buy a fixture for 10 years. So you should save some on your maintenance line. That you would then look at borrowing money from NIPA for 6 years to finance the project. Right now, our interest rate is 2.35%, but again, just to put a higher number for purposes of this, we use 4%. And then we would say, oh, we settle on a loan. Again, if this was the way it perfectly landed, you'd actually be annually cash flow positive from the project. But what you can also do then is you could just buy down the project whenever you want. Part of it, all of it, no prepayment penalty. If a year from now you won that grant, hey, we owe 300 grand, here's 100. And we would just, sort of recalculate the loan. So it's working with NYPA as a municipality will be very transparent. The numbers here, wherever, we'll show you everything. We don't work as a private sector GC and oh, I hooked you for 356. Oh, we got it done for 250. We dunk 100 grand in our pocket. We don't do that. You pay 250 if that's what it shakes out at with bids and stuff. So it's pretty transparent. NYPA, we're working for the governor's office, in essence. We're trying to mitigate greenhouse gas, climate change, help municipalities save energy, and hopefully improve the community. And people generally like this lighting, if it's done right. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So the numbers that we're looking at in terms of savings, that's an annual savings,
Annual,
right?
yep.
So to telescope this, basically after 5 or 6 years, based on the savings, this program's not gonna cost us anything.
The program will cost you nothing for the 5 or 6 years. Then, come year 7, you're done paying NYPA, now you're just reaping all the savings for the
Right.
village.
So it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Right. Basically.
Yeah.
What's the
Which is
turnaround
why
time from
it
start?
made sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So the process, and I actually put in the contract request, there are 2 things that have to be signed right now in order to move forward. There's an authorization to proceed, which means the village is committing, and it's in the packet that I gave to the mayor. There's an authorization to proceed, which will kick off the project. NYPA will assign one of our implementation contractor engineering firms to the project. We'll have a project manager dedicated, and we'll set up a kickoff meeting. So there's the authorization to proceed, and then there's something called a master cost recovery agreement. Because this ATP is 1 page. Lawyers don't like 1-page documents. They want to give you a 35-page document. So that's the terms and conditions agreement, which will be emailed to the mayor within the next few days. I put in for that request, so that should land in your inbox. So those are the 2 documents. I get those, and I close the project, put it into production. We schedule an engineering design meeting 6 to 8 weeks out, where we're gonna sit down and best case scenario is have a big map. We can start identifying areas of concern on the map, get everything lined up. We do that engineering. These guys, the engineers, come up with a refined version of this. They will have gone out to bid, they'll have firm labor, they will have said, Jeff, you were all wrong with your fixture wattages. We can save more energy for these guys. So they'll then figure out the fixture set, price it all out based on our pricing from Philips, sit down with you with a revised version of this. You say, it's pretty close, you were pretty right, it is what it is. Then we sign an actual construction agreement. And that's the 3rd document. And then we hire whoever that labor bidder was, do the project. We manage the project, both a NYPA staff person and our implementation engineer of record, who's going to sign off when it's all done, does construction management, making sure that the wattages end up on the right poles. We'll also update your existing registry of fixtures to Con Edison so that your bill can be reduced based on your new wattages. Now they basically bill you based on your wattages and assume the light's running 4,380 hours a year. So we'll make sure that they know, that 400 watt is gone now. Now they have 108 watts. Charge them, 26% of what you used to charge them, or whatever the numbers are. So we'll update that to make sure that you begin saving money and use that money basically to pay us until the loan's exhausted, or however you go about paying for it.
What's the time frame from starting construction to the end?
So basically, we
Based
kick.
on the 600?
Yeah, so let's say we kick off the project in 8 weeks. Well, today's what, November 5th? So December, so the first week of January, we're doing the design, January, February, usually by like the end of March, we would have firmed up numbers. So we would look to say, start construction then by the end of April. 600 lights, the contract is due about 25 a day, one crew. So whatever that is, 30 days of installation time.
Pretty quick.
Yeah, yeah.
Jeff, how
Once they
much
get
of,
set up, the hard part is the beginning. Once
Right.
you get the linemen, they're just gonna rock right down the street and do them, you know?
how much of Pelham's lights did you do, percentage-wise?
So
All
we
of-
did all of them. I think 697, I think they had.
Right. So I just have one other question. We have some unique bulbs and at the end of our light post, kind of old
Right.
fixtures. Would you replace that or?
The fixture head, yeah. Just to be completely transparent, looking at an inventory, I have no idea what you have. So I assumed Cobra heads, which are cheaper. So we would basically set up a second row on this sheet. Your Cobra head pricing and your decorative pricing. And the engineers, the design engineers will work with you guys because
Right.
these decoratives, you can get a decorative for $350. Made out of aluminum, nice looking fixture. You can get a decorative for $3,000, cast iron, all sorts of fancy little designs. So we'll work with you, we'll show, all sorts of selection stuff, so, yeah. But I don't know how many decoratives you have right now, that's what our design engineer's gonna figure out and count up.
Right.
Right.
I think we need to do some house inventory and cleaning before we even talk to you, because we have a lot of different types of lights that we should consider even replacing. It might be more cost-effective to replace the whole unit at this point, But that's more on us,
Well, we do decorative
Okay.
heads, but, the posts, we would leave the posts,
Yeah.
unless you wanted new posts for whatever reason, but we
Mhm.
would, just put the new fixtures, they're pretty much
I think-
standard diameter.
I think one of the things that I find attractive about this is we can get them to do that.
We'll do that,
You
and then you
guys-
can decide if you actually
You're
want
gonna
to install. it.
inventory everything anyway.
Right, we're gonna inventory anything,
Right.
everything, anyway.
Mhm.
And then we can set up, like oftentimes what we do at municipalities too is they have mostly Cobra heads, they have some decoratives, and they say, gee, while you guys are out here, take a look at our football field and our park that
Park,
has, other lighting in it. And we'll take a look at that and analyze that and include that in a bid, and then have 3, 4, 5 rows that you can then select from.
Yeah.
So I had the city of Glen Cove on Long Island, a pretty big customer, with about 1,600 lights. I had no idea, again, that all Cobra heads. Turned out they had about 450 decoratives, which are more money. They're gonna go forward with about 300 of those decoratives in their 2 key downtown areas. And then the other ones off in the Netherlands, out in the woods, they're gonna leave those for now. We might come back and do them
Okay.
later. But they wanted to stick, they had to stay they wanted to stay under a 10-year payback, and that's
Okay.
what we did for them.
So
But
the
we're
other,
doing parking lot lighting for them too, so, it's sort of like it becomes a menu. What do you want to do?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if you've had any discussions about the new development that's being built
A little
on
bit,
the
yeah.
river. So there's gonna be a lot more streetlights in Sleepy Hollow over the
Right.
next number of years.
Right.
Some of which are gonna be completed very, very soon. And then as the development progresses, there'll be a significant amount of lights added to the list that you'll be ultimately doing.
And it's the city of Glencoe has the same phenomenon going on too, where there's this massive development going on. So we basically, with the specs that we provided them for the rest of the city's lights, they're gonna make sure, and that, because that was designed 3 years ago and they're finally building it, they didn't spec LEDs for the outside street lights and post tops and stuff. So basically, they're gonna use our spec until their builder use the same one, so everything's
So-
consistent for their maintenance and stuff.
We ought to make sure that Craig is in the loop on all of this, because he's responsible for producing the streetlights.
They're doing LED, right?
And we know at this point, based on the specs, how many there's gonna be, and approximate timing. So that should be baked into the overall plan.
That's fine. Those, you know, we get into those details when we have the design engineer, who's basically gonna take all the moving parts and all the different elements and redevelop the cost sheet. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but the more we know, the more you want to include in a bid, the better, so we can have more firm prices, so you can make educated decisions on what this is gonna cost.
Sounds good.
So, I don't know, I think we should do this. I think it's pretty straightforward. And it gets us our inventory at the same time, and then
Yeah.
allows us, I think, in the process, to make some of those decisions about, we like this on Maple Street, we want to keep it that way,
Yeah.
or we don't, or let's take that same kind of thing and move, and apply it to some other neighborhoods. So I think it's a great opportunity. Can we, can we have a special session so that we can get them started?
Yeah.
And just authorize me to sign, subject to approval by a village council, your one pager?
The one pager,
And then
you
when you
have a
get it to
copy.
me, if it's before our next week, then we can just.
The other document, I requested that this morning at like, 6:30 in the morning. So they're gonna, the gentleman who handles that is actually on the Sleepy Hollow School Board. So he didn't want to touch it, so he assigned it to somebody else.
Who's that?
The gentleman's name is John Payne.
Yeah, well, God, who is?
Yeah, he's our contract controls guy. So he said, please recuse me from this one because it's too close to home. And another young lady, Lindsay Pareel, is going to send that out to the mayor next day or two. It should land. So it's a pretty straightforward document.
So you want to jump on it?
Yeah,
Yes.
Can I get a motion to go into a special session?
so moved.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I don't know John Payne. Just want to go on record as saying that.
I just know who he is. That's
Never
He's not
met
a
him.
pain, he's a good guy.
I remember
I
a
never met
Thomas Paine. I've read some of his stuff. But, all right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention. All right, it's a special session called for one reason, and that's to consider a resolution authorizing the mayor to sign an agreement to move forward on a street lighting proposal, street lighting project with NIPA. And it would be subject to authorizing me to sign the agreement, but subject to review by village council.
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, resolution's approved.
Awesome. And Mayor, if your council has any comments, this document, they could, redline it, send it back to me. Our legal team is, you can't turn it upside down, but they're pretty, they want to work. They want to work with you guys. So reasonable amendments or revisions are usually accepted, I found, for my projects. But, we'll
That's
work
good.
with you.
Can I get a motion to end the special session?
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstention, the special session's over. And back in our work session.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jeff.
Bueno,
Thank
thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Looking forward to working with you guys.
Yeah, took the words out of my mouth.
Yep. Thank you, Anthony.
Thanks.
Have a good night. Enjoy the rest of your meeting. Thank you, everyone. Mayor,
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
good to see you
We'll be
again.
in touch.
Take care. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, comprehensive plan and our LWRP. We should be scheduling a meeting to vote on this. And I know we've closed the public hearing. We had some additional comments that came in. We were, I think, pretty good about anything that came in close to that Tuesday we accepted as part of the record. So it's an opportunity for everybody to look through those. And I would like to be able to set a date for us to, I think if we have a date to adopt it, then a bunch of the pieces that may be outstanding will get done. between that now and then. There's a couple of things that I just wanted to mention because we had comments from a number of people on various parts of the plan, and a lot of comments about about just a few parts of the plan. So I think there are things that were incorporated in the plan to begin with because of the work that Rochelle and Sandra did with the committee and the input that you had from residents and business owners throughout the village, and that helped shape the plan to begin with. So there was a lot of things that were included that came from our residents. So it was a great start. And then we've made some changes in it, or proposed changes in the plan, the comprehensive plan and the LWRP since then, and those red line versions are out there to give people an opportunity of where we were going to go. A couple of points that came up that were repeats. One was riverfront use, and I think it's really clear that this board is in favor of increased activity on our riverfront, both I was going to say pedestrian, not handheld, but kayaks, swimmers, fishing, non-motorized, and there are a couple of different places where that's already underway, and we'd like to see more of it. And we're interested in seeing whether or not some of these other things could play out. Can you do a mooring field off of Kingsland or not? We don't really know, but we want to encourage that. We'd like to see further look into that. There were a lot of people that wrote in about the Route 9 transportation study that was done, and it's referenced in the comprehensive plan, but just referenced as a point that we can, a study that we can look at in the future and others can look at in the future. We, as a board, didn't want it to appear in the comprehensive plan because we thought it would seem to be a tacit endorsement. And we do not endorse the study and the findings in the study. And why is that? Well, the study is something, we're not even sure which draft is being presented at any one time. It's been somewhat of a moving target with edits and fairly substantive changes over time that are somewhat mysterious in how they happen. They certainly weren't brought to our attention. And some of the proposals that I've read in the plan or in the various drafts of it make absolutely no sense. It doesn't make sense to have a bike path that goes from the west side of Route 9 to the east side of Route 9 and then back to the west side of Route 9 within Sleepy Hollow. And then ends when you run into Terrytown, because Terrytown doesn't want a bike lane at that border. And Terrytown seemed somewhat lukewarm about the idea altogether. It's also, if one reads through the entire study, it's fairly obvious that it's not going to be a contiguous or continuous bike lane all the way through the other river towns, and that there are big gaps where other river towns said, nope, we're not going to do it. So that should be a signal to folks that are reading it. And I think it's also something that, as promoted by Bike Terrytown, is something that is bike-centric, as one would expect from an organization called Bike Terrytown. But I think it privileges bikes above all other forms of transportation, including pedestrians. And we, as a board, know that our responsibility is to cyclists and to pedestrians and to motorists and to our businesses and our residents. And as Deputy Mayor Rosenblum has said more eloquently than I can right now in the past, that's a balance that we have to consider at all times. And so endorsing something by putting in the plan and saying that we endorse it is something that we didn't want to do for those reasons. And it would appear to the state, New York State, who are the only ones who actually implement any of this stuff because it is a state road, that we would be saying we want to do this. And that would just not be consistent with our own discussions.
Mayor, can I ask a question with regards to this topic? Do we know what other municipalities are doing with regard, because I know that they presented this to Terrytown and Irvington. I was just curious as to what position they took.
From what I know, but I don't know it all, I know Tarrytown had a big problem with obviously moving parking spaces. And the latest I heard, they, weren't interested in the bike lane in their business district. I know Dobbs Ferry had kind of it veered off into the aqueduct, so it bypassed a lot of Route 9. I'm not sure about Irvington, Hastings. I think they're probably more supportive, but I don't know for sure, so I don't want to comment.
Okay, thank you.
One way is just take a look at the specific drawings in the plan itself, or whichever version of the plan you can get your hands on, and it shows these gaps in some of the villages to the south. And the specific stuff in Sleepy Hollow just, for me, just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean that we're not committed to making bike riding safer in the village. There are other ways to do it. So the idea that we're not providing a tacit endorsement doesn't mean there aren't some good ideas in the study. We just need to figure out a better way to accommodate, as the mayor said, pedestrians, motorists, and bike riders. We need safety for all and everybody in the village. And we're determined to make that happen, but I think we're also saying that the Route 9 study in of itself is not the solution on its own.
I think too, also to just keep in mind, we are making a lot of references to other studies as well. We're not isolating this one to say we're not putting this in, but we're putting something else in. We're looking at a lot of the studies as a reference point, because that's what their guidance. It's a guiding principle to what the vision is of the comprehensive plan. So again, reiterating what you're saying is the balance. We have to get to the, implementation in the strategy committees to really bring it to life. So that's where I would, vote in for the confidence of those committees to then lean on some of these studies to do a further dive into it to see where it makes sense. As they're looking at executing and implementing some of the plans. So that's, I just wanted to, for my own sake, that we're not isolating any one study and keeping it out, but rather we're using them as reference points in totality, and it's being fair across all.
The other, you raise a very good point, and that is other studies and plans and reference points. The comprehensive plan is itself a reference point. There isn't anything in it that when we adopt the plan that says, okay, well, Mr. Gross, go start building this. We still have to approve everything that is considered in this plan as individual projects and go through all of the permitting process that is required for any one of those as well. Things that look at rezoning, for example, and things like that, there are obviously public hearings and other things that we need to do in order to implement. I, for one, would love to, get the plan completed and move on to looking at, what are we going to implement, what areas of it. Big focus of ours has been through this whole process has been looking at our downtown. And not just transportation in our downtown, but how can we encourage other investment or other ways of improving our downtown? And I think that would be, that's going to be a big emphasis of ours. Would also just add as one other thing, I know there was a note, there was comments we got rather from the Sleepy Hollow Manor Association, and they were concerned about infrastructure improvements. And I would just point out to them that some of the improvements that they asked for in the plan are actually underway right now. We had said we're not going to wait on certain kinds of things. So we are redoing, in a years-long effort, redoing our water lines. Huge infrastructure project and critically important to the future of the village. We're just looking at, for the folks that are looking at green communities, efforts and other things. We are looking at one of those in a very practical way this evening about what do we do with our street lighting. So there are things that are, we're not waiting for the plan to be adopted for us to go ahead and work on those. So, you guys good with adopting these next week?
Yes.
So we'll put it on for next week, and we'll go from there.
I just have a question, Mr. Mayor. Not a question, a statement about the conceptual design plan for Route 9. Tarrytown, Hastings, and Dobbs Ferry have passed resolutions to continue the study with items that they're concerned about. Tarrytown's, for example, was passed in June, and in the body of the resolution, it does have their concerns spelled out. So I think we as a village ought to think about doing that, to pass a resolution to move to the next phase 2. If you all agree. I don't know if you've even, I could forward you the information that I have. And, it's the river town, so you're not really committing to anything other than moving to the next phase for the project, and I don't know why we wouldn't. It's not all about the bike lanes either. It's about other things. So, it was interesting that some of the villages just passed a resolution to continue, but Tarrytown in particular had their concerns about losing parking spots. So if we put that, if we put those items in our resolution, I think that would be, I would be comfortable with that, So, but I can forward the board and you
Sure.
the information.
Yeah,
It's actually on the website, so, on their website.
And something that I feel that we did a really good job with, and that's with what the chief is leading with the parking consultant, because that is a big component of this. I mean,
Right.
it's even the way that the parking is configured. I mean, and capitalizing on our real estate as to where that parking is, where we're going to see people migrating and where that's supposed to land. I mean, we can actually end up with more parking spaces and be more efficient with our space. That's why I feel we've all done the due diligence and with being proactive with what the chief is doing and bringing that consultant in at the same time as we're doing the plans. So that in itself could maybe migrate to
Right.
having some specialized area where there's biking, walking, mobility.
Right.
I still can't help to think that we're looking at this trolley aspect. We have to give that a consideration, and that needs space too. So that's part of that whole balance thing again, but I didn't want that to be lost either, because that's a big piece of what
Right.
we're doing. And for a very low cost, I think we're going to get a lot of effectiveness out of it.
Right. And I think Sleepy Hollow as a village can adopt lanes with bike and car as they share lanes. We can do that ourselves. We can work
Sure.
with the committee, the Bike Tarrytown Committee, and come up with alternatives. I suggested that early on, and, they seem to be fixated on Route 9 and, a protected bike lane, which is the ultimate. But sometimes, we have to negotiate with them and see what they, I'm all for bike lanes. I think it's important to have in every community. But there might be other avenues or streets that we can use for bike lanes. I mean, so.
Sure,
Even Beekman Avenue to get down to the new development. We're going to have a bike lane on Beekman, I'm sure, someday.
I think you got to, my point of view is you look at it from a destination standpoint.
Yeah.
If you start looking at some of the corridors that we have that go down to the river and some of those streets, there might be an opportunity, like you said, in doing something like that. But that, again, is going to be umbrellaed under one of the
Right.
committees within the strategies that we're going to look to implement. And then it comes down to cost. Then you have to budget it, you got to work it. But I think that there's two different, there's that one way that it's all on Route 9 and it's having a corridor for everything.
Yeah.
Or there's a special design around it that I think could be very appealing. And we have to understand we're an old
Yeah.
community, and we have to work within our framework of who we are and not changing that fabric either, so
Right.
I think
And
that's
the
important.
limited space we have.
And the limited, absolutely. That's why I'm saying if you did something unique, or if it's going to a certain destination, it might make sense. But we won't know until we until we look at it, I guess. You know, that's my point of view with it.
Well, I know one of the things that I would like us to focus on in terms of transportation issues in the village is Pearson and Route 9 and the Old Dutch Church and Gordon. And I mean, it's like, we made it through another Halloween, and it
Yes.
just, I know, like,
Scary.
with everything we're trying to do with the state to get them, and that is that
That is-
are those our pedestrian signs? Is that, who put those up? Pedestrian crossing, but there's still no green pedestrian I mean, just that alone, plus kind of making that intersect, I mean, that is I think by far the most important thing. We all saw over the last 6 weeks how many people were blowing through that intersection, and it just, that is a critical design element that we have to address. So we'll put it on for next week.
Yeah.
And then we'll get started on priorities. Great, thanks. All right, on to a really exciting subject. Changing and critically important one of changing the fee for backflow preventer permits. Mr. Giacchio, you want to kick this one off with Mr. Gross?
Richie brought this to my attention. Our fee for backflow preventer, the initial fee to install it is antiquated. We're much cheaper than the county, for example. Richie's recommending that we go at $60 to install a backflow preventer. He's recommending that we increase it to $180, which was what the county is charging. But that's just a one-time fee for installation for new properties, for example. But it's not an annual fee, which I think I might have confused the board with that one.
Is this residents and businesses, or who
Anyone
bids these?
else.
I don't know.
And who
What
goes
is
to
it?
the county, though? I mean, wouldn't your municipality, what do the other municipalities charge for it?
Well, first of all, good evening, Mayor and the board.
Sorry.
We've been at $60 since day one that I've been reviewing the applications, and little by little, the county has been creeping up their fees. I remember Sarah always asking for ways to bring money in to the village, and this is only for new applications that come in. Every unit that's built, wherever it happens to be throughout the village, has to have a backflow preventer in it. It takes me about an hour and a half to 2 hours to review the plans that are sent in. I sign off on them. I then send them to the county. There's a check that comes to the village for $60, and there's a check for $180 that goes to the county. I pull ours out, send the county theirs. With additional construction in the village, those applications are going to go through the roof. So there is a big money which potentially can be brought into the village by increasing the application fees to be compatible with the county at 180. And as the county goes up, we should go up also. We should keep right in line so the two checks are identical.
So, Rich, the applicant has to pay twice. They have to pay the county and the village?
Yes,
Okay, and
Yes.
just to clarify, the county is 180 and the village is 60.
right now the village is 60.
Right.
That's correct.
What's the purpose of having a fee paid to both the county and the village if we're talking about the same thing?
Because the county officially, they stamp off on it. They send it back to me and to the applicant and to the engineer. They will send a copy back that it's been approved. So they review it.
Plan needs to be approved by the county?
Yes, yes.
So it has to be spec'd out?
And there's many times that I send the complete package back to the engineers because there's either something missing or something wrong with the design of the unit.
Are they
The-
looking for the same thing we are? The county and the village? In other words, I'm trying to understand why it needs to be approved twice.
It's the same application, because the way the law reads, the state and the Westchester County Health Department, it's presented to the local authorities first
So it's the health
for
department
review. It's a health
talking
department
about,
law.
Not just Westchester County.
Correct.
That
If-
helps.
If an engineer was to try to bypass the village and send it directly to the county would reject it and send it back to them saying the village has not reviewed it and their signature is not on it.
So Richie, I have a question. Has the amount of work that you've put into these applications over the years increased
Yes,
since it was $60?
yes.
So now you're saying you spend an hour and a half, 2 hours. What did it used to be?
An hour.
Right.
And how many applicants, how many of these do you touch a month?
Right now I have a total of 225.
A month
No, on file.
on file?
Yeah, that will, any new construction that was done all has a backflow preventer in it. There are some single-family homes that have irrigation systems on them that require a backflow on it.
So when you say there's 200, I guess I'm trying to get a handle. If it's an hour and a half of your time per application, how many are you touching in a month or a week?
They
Like,
are
I'm trying to get a-
increasing. I'm probably getting 2 a week now,
2 a week,
yeah, coming in.
okay.
And there's going to be more and more coming in as your developments
As
start to
it
Does the
unfold.
building department's hands touch this as well?
Every single unit, such as, I'll take 11 River Street or Ichabod's, every single unit has a backflow preventer in it. Not
Okay.
just one backflow that covers the whole place.
Sure,
Each apartment or each unit has a backflow preventer in it.
okay. So
we
when we,
have to get
oh,
separate
sorry.
permits, though, is what I'm asking for.
Oh.
Do they get a separate permit through the building department for something like this? Like, I'm curious as
Yeah.
to how many times they're getting charged for this. Already they're getting charged, people are getting charged twice.
When the building is under construction, the engineers that are doing the building know that each unit needs a backflow preventer, so they start coming in dribs and drabs. I may get 5 a week, I may get 10 a week when there's an apartment house being built, until every single unit is done.
So who's paying for it, the developer? Or
The
or
concrete,
village owner, I mean, the unit owner?
The owner.
Okay.
yeah, the initial is probably paid by the developer. Those are some of the checks that I'm seeing coming in now, and then they pass it off to whoever buys the unit.
Right.
And then there is an annual charge, not to us, but there's an annual charge to test them. And that's done by a certified tester. There's many of them out there, and that's whatever they charge. That has nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
Is
So-
this the backflow preventer for the main
Sprinkler system.
or
Yeah.
just sprinklers?
No, for your actual domestic water. Your domestic water line has a backflow preventer on it. The idea behind a backflow preventer is that if you have, years ago, you used to have slop sinks that had a hose going off of the spigot into the water. You have your water running. All of a sudden, there's a major fire in town, and it creates a siphon. And all that, whatever it is in the sink, goes into your water system. The backflow preventers prevent that from happening.
Richie, current code, anything new that's built pretty much has to have sprinklers, multiple dwellings.
Yes.
Private houses over a certain number of square feet. So we're talking about anything new or additions that are over a certain size to existing houses.
50%.
So,
Yes,
So every house would have it regardless.
right,
Yeah.
any new house, but
any new
if,
house.
if a person wants to do an addition on their house and they talk to Sean, he may say to them, you're gonna have to put a sprinkler system in, which,
Right.
Which
you know,
triggers
triggers this package.
triggers a backflow preventer.
But also, if you get a sprinkler system installed in your house, you probably have to get this. done
Triggers
too.
a backflow preventer.
So, you know,
Swimming pools, that people have irrigation systems, that they have sprinklers, because some of them have they used to put a chemical in, like in a garage. Now they're all dry systems, but they used to be like antifreeze. in the sprinkler systems. So if that was ever to get sucked back into your drinking water, you'd have a problem.
So the requirement to actually have the backflow preventer is there for all of these situations. So basically what you're saying is, look, over time, the village spends more time considering these applications, we should charge more for the application.
Yes.
So people are gonna pay whatever it costs to put one in and design properly and everything else. And you're saying, hey, we need another $120 for each one of these applications in order to adequately cover the cost of doing that.
Well, that's what you're proposing. I mean, I guess the question that I would have is, I mean, ideally, you know, it's always nice to have that same balance between what we charge and what the county charges, but I don't know, my sense is if it's currently $60, that it's kind of excessive to go up, you know, 200%, you know, to charge 180, if the people are currently paying 60 right now.
But it's not the same people. It's new
Right.
applicants.
No, I know.
When was the
I
last
just
time
feel
we
permit
charged, we
fees
had
are
an increase?
kind of out of control. And I agree, I think it's a little excessive. I
Well,
mean,
just-
it seems like we're hitting everybody over the head with
No,
permit fees.
I don't disagree with you, but I'm just drawing to light that it's a one-time payment for a new applicant.
Right.
Right.
So the people who haven't done this yet haven't paid it
No,
yet.
I get that. I get that. But it's just another tax, right? I mean,
It's another
and,
fee.
and I'm okay with, you know, hey, if we're investing time in order to review this, I think we should be adequately reimbursed. But by the same token, if the rate is at 60, and, you know, it's a significant increase, is all I'm saying.
Well, two things. One is, when was the last time we had a price increase? And two, what do other villages charge
that's what I
their
asked
homeowners, like Tarrytown, Pleasantville?
We've
Right.
never had an increase,
We've never had an increase.
because when
So
it
this
first
has been
started,
Going back since you were a little kid?
no,
60
when we
bucks?
when we first started reviewing the backflows, the county and us were the same fee. It was $60.
What year was that?
Now
mean,
you-
20
now you're
years ago?
taxing my memory.
20 years ago?
Yeah, probably about 20 years ago. Yeah.
Anthony, can you find out if most villages charge what the county charges, please? Thanks.
Are there any other fees we need to know about? We haven't raised in 20 years?
I was just going to say, I think this has been a really useful discussion. I don't think we're going to come to a conclusion tonight because of some other information, but but it's been very useful because it gets
Shed some
into
light.
like, hey, how much are we charging people and for what and why? And is that covered elsewhere in the taxes that they pay? So that's a good discussion, and it will cover other things. We did, just as a reminder, put a fee schedule in separately so that, a year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
A little longer, I think.
Yeah, so that we wouldn't have to have a public hearing to change the code when we want to increase a fee.
Right.
We put it as an addendum to the code so we can do it by resolution, which would really be cumbersome to do that every time. So when we get to that point, if we get to that point, we want to raise this one, we'll go there.
Okay.
But I think we'll halt the conversation there. Thank you.
Thank you, Richie.
Thank you, Richie.
Gross?
Yeah, just one comment on the gentleman you had before. We've already started changing. These lights here are all LED lights. They were all changed over. And as your street lights go on Route 9, they are changed over to LED lights. That would be exactly what they would be doing,
Okay,
so.
thank you.
Less they'll have to do.
Mr. Mayor, do we want to move to WS 5 since Richie's here? It's
Sure.
related to the water department.
Yeah, it's a SCADA
Don't
system.
go anywhere, Mr. Gross, yeah.
It's a SCADA system. Can't exactly tell you what SCADA stands for, but what it is it's an overview of your entire water system. The alarms, what will happen is if we lose power at the pump station, alarm kicks in, I can get it on my phone. If we lose water, I get it on my phone. Or chlorine drops down, I get it on my phone.
There's an app for that.
It covers all aspects of the water system on a picture. I can come in the morning, go on the computer, and I can see if everything's running fine at the pump station. I can see the levels in our tanks, if we're up, if we're down. 3 o'clock in the morning, I'll get a call from the pump station. It calls me, and it tells me that there's a problem. Either the pumps are off. That would allow me to look and see what the level in the tank is, instead of calling a guy in and paying him for a call out to come in. I could say, all right, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, he comes in 4 hours, we're not going to lose that much water. But the SCADA system is a very, very valuable system
Yeah.
to be installed.
So it's really just, you're asking for a renewal on what you already have.
Yes.
Right?
Like maintenance.
And it's-
maintenance.
Yeah, and
Just
it's,
maintenance.
It's a maintenance
Sure.
agreement, because right now, the system has to be tweaked a little bit, and what's happening is because we've fixed a lot of leaks throughout the system, in the middle of the night, the new pumps that were put in, they're called variable speed pumps. Depending on how much water has to go out, depends on how fast the motor, electric motor turns to pump the water out. Right now, what's happening is the pumps are running at such a low rate, in the middle of the night, they are actually shutting off. It's a protection on the pump.
okay.
So Richie, what it stands for is supervisory control and data acquisition, which sounds like a really important thing.
Yes,
Is
Are
this
they-
a yearly contract?
Yeah.
yes.
So we do this every year?
Yes.
We've
Has the
done it
price
since
stayed-
we had the
So that's kind of-
system.
Right.
And has that
'cause
price stayed for 20 years?
Right now, we're working,
2016.
Is it going
right
to
now,
go
we're working on time and material.
up? Okay,
And they get you for portal to portal. They're driving, and they really whack you on tech that comes out, how long he stays there.
Okay.
The contract covers all that, with the exception of parts.
okay. And it's
Naturally.
the same, the renewal is the same price?
Right.
So nothing's
Yes, same
changing?
price.
Okay, so, that makes sense. Thank you, Richie, for that.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thanks.
Thank
Put
you.
it on,
Yeah.
we'll put it on for Tuesday for approval.
Nice to have you back, Richie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, next up, discussion on our sidewalk cafe policy. And Ms. Giacchi, you want to outline the subject for us?
This kind of came to light this past October with the number of people that we had here in town and the great weather we had all through October. The cafe sidewalk permit ends September 30th. A lot of restaurants, delicatessens, cafes and things like that would love to have outdoor seating during nice weather in October when we have so many tourists. It's from April 1st to September 30th. At the very least, I was suggesting that we extend it to October 31st, but the board could consider making it year-round if the weather permits. I don't know why it would be a problem to have people out on, sidewalk,
How much is the
tables and
permit?
chairs. I don't know offhand, I'm sorry.
Let's hold
It's not
off on
terribly expensive.
raising the price of
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
permit for now.
It's not terribly expensive.
$2.
$180.
Twice.
Well, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, it makes
Yeah,
all
I
the
mean-
sense in the
Yeah.
world,
Yeah,
certainly
that's
through
fine.
October.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking of other cities that other places that we compare to favorably, like Paris. And the sun comes out and all of a sudden there's a chair and a little table, and the sun goes away and the chair and the table disappear, and the weather's nice,
I think it's a great way to invite people into like a restaurant or,
Yeah.
deli.
Yeah.
All right, what's your preference?
Yep.
Run it through November, just
Yeah.
like get rid of just make it 12 months?
Yeah.
Fine with me.
Weather permitting.
I mean,
permitting.
nobody's gonna go outside if the weather is,
Not good.
like, I don't care how many chairs you have,
Exactly.
you know, if it's 2 or 200, it's 40 degrees, nobody's gonna sit down, so,
Even less if it's 10 degrees.
yeah. All right, Mr. Giacchio, this is a code
Yeah, it's a
issue,
code.
so let's put it on for next week as a noticing for a public hearing. And since we're noticing for a public hearing, let's make it so that let's do as we usually do, which is make it as broad as possible, because then we can always rein it back. Okay?
Sounds good.
So it would be 366 days of the year to cover those leap years. Okay? Great, so we'll draft it. The Arbor Day event,
So in most places around the country, Arbor Day's in April for some crazy reason, and Sleepy Hollow it's in November. We've done this the last few years. It's part of our Tree City USA initiative. To be a Tree City USA, you have to have an Arbor Day event. We'd like to have it on November 20th. And what we do is we plant a tree. We have usually have the after-school kids help us. Last year, we did one right at the senior center. A couple years ago, I think we did one dedicated to a senior citizen.
We did one in Barnhart. a couple
We
of
did
years
one in
Mhm.
Barnhart. It's a nice little event. DPW helps, and we get volunteers. I think John Millar's helped each year. So it's a nice event. We like to do it on November 20th. Part of the requirement is that we pass a resolution announcing Arbor Day. So that would be a resolution for next week.
So you said most other places have it in? May?
April.
In April?
So,
So why wouldn't we have it?
So
Yeah, why don't we change it?
it just kind of became a little tradition. What happened was, we were trying to apply for Tree City USA, and they said you didn't have an Arbor Day event this year, and it was November. So we said, all right, we're gonna have one.
Well,
And then it just became a tradition, but it's actually a nice tradition. I think it's a good time to plant a tree, too.
It's like Thanksgiving.
yeah,
Yeah, so it turned out to be a nice little thing. It doesn't matter when you do it.
It's a slow month.
It doesn't matter, as far as Tree City USA, it doesn't matter
Yeah,
when
if
you
there were
have it, as long as you have
holiday
it during the course.
There's
of
not like a
Maybe,
better
yeah.
chance of a tree surviving if you planted in April versus November?
yeah, I don't think you.
I don't think it matters, depending on what tree you plant, but these trees have been fine.
a
Yeah.
lot of stuff, it's
If
better
there's a
in the
lot of
fall.
buzz about Arbor Day in April or May, and we're the only ones who are,
It's
Wrapping
more,
arms
the
around
buzz, honestly, the buzz is more about Earth Day in April. They
Yeah.
try and, they try and coincide with Earth Day, and we do our cleanup, and we do our own Earth Day events. So this is a way of doing it twice, in a way.
I recall being at one or two of them, and if it's the end of November, it can be really cold, obviously, and it's hard for people to stand out there and
Yeah.
plant trees.
That's why there's a guy with a backhoe.
No, the trees are small.
It's
It's a
still
shovel.
why there's a guy with a backhoe.
Whatever.
All right, so at least this year, we'll do, and then in the spring, we
We
can.
can do one in April, too.
Yeah. So we'll put that on.
Is that 180 days from now?
We have some time to think about it.
you're right.
All right, that completes our agenda for the evening. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who may,
Executive session.
Can we do a little quick executive session?
I mean, Oh,
Personnel
golly.
and legal, there's two
What's
two
that?
updates.
Motion to go into executive session.
Second.
moved to discuss
To
legal
discuss the
matters
personnel issue.
and personnel issues.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Any
Second.
discussion, moved and seconded, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, this is an executive session, the Board of Trustees. I expect that when we return, we will just end the executive session and take no further business, and undertake no further business this evening. So thank you and good night. And if you are watching this live and you haven't voted, you've still got another 40 minutes. So hey, get out there, please. We'd all appreciate it. Thank you so much, and
Thank you.
good night.